to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is financial advisor and money coach, Jodielynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
I'm realizing I recorded that intro right after I had a cold this past spring, and you can hear it in my voice. I got to re-record it because it's not so husky.
It's your extra burly voice.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I like that. That's a good explanation. I like that one. I can go with
Yeah. I'm all about changing your perspective so it fits where you want to go.
There you go. I love it. That is fabulous. Well, we're going to practice changing a little perspective today because our scheduled guest could not make it. Once again, reinforcing for me, I am loving it whenever we get a guest through Podmatch. I found you through Podmatch. You found me.
Yeah.
One of us found the other. I'm not sure which. I found all the really good guests, all the ones that have been coming on who've had really interesting perspectives. They've all been through Podmatch. And we're kind of at the point in my calendar where the ones that came in from other sources are filtering out. So I think by July, which is coming up in a couple of days, I think it's going to be either all Podmatch or people we already know who've been on the show and wanted to come back.
Wow.
So it's going to be really good from now on. This is going to be good time. Yeah.
Oh, exciting.
Good stuff happening. So, But anyway, that leaves us a little bit at loose ends about what we want to talk about today. So I'm just going to start off by saying, how's it going in Canada?
It's going well. It's so nice out here. It's finally like summer, if I dare say.
It's summer. Details at 11.
Yeah, exactly. Which is beautiful. We have our garden is in full bloom with all of the weeds as well. So that has been preoccupying my time. But also on the perspective shift, I'm getting a wicked tan. So,
ooh, oh.
Yes. Yeah.
Very good.
It's good here in Canada. There's some interesting things politically that are going on here. And I think, in the United States, and it's been interesting stepping out of that reality and working on becoming the observer rather than going along the, roller coaster of emotions, if you will. So
that is so much more comfortable. It feels better. It takes the weight off of your shoulders. The other way, you're wearing the world on your shoulders every single day when you're on the other tack. But you're right, when you get that kind of stand back, far away perspective, it has a different feel to it entirely. And actually, one of the best ways to get there is to not look at it at all for a while, kind of desensitize yourself to it, and then go after it from that far away perspective. And it looks different, doesn't it?
Totally different.
Yeah.
Well, and then you start questioning this belief system, and it's not even belief system, but what we have defined as right versus wrong. And I'm not saying that there isn't right versus wrong, but when you take a step back and you're becoming the observer, you're not as emotionally attached to one or the other. You're open to a new perspective. You're open to seeing something that maybe you didn't see beforehand.
It's a great point. In fact, with the guests that we had on the show yesterday, we were talking a lot about the Ted Lasso TV series where they bring up the concept of judgment. And it's the one I've made reference to the scene many times here on the show in the last couple of months because this is one of the few TV series I actually like. So it's nice to talk about something I like,
Yeah.
But there's this one very famous scene where the lead protagonist, Ted Lasso, has a darts match with one of the really nasty guys and wins the dart match. And in the middle of the dart match, he does this little soliloquy on the value of being curious rather than judgmental.
Yes.
Have you seen that one? I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I remember you talking about it.
Oh, well, you got to see it. It's beautiful. But anyway, first of all, I actually saw a reference, I think, on social media. A young woman had actually gotten a tattoo that said, "Be curious, not judgmental," because of that show. So the show is actually having an influence on people in terms of, affecting their perspective on things, which is pretty darn cool. But I kept thinking about that whole idea of judging versus being curious. And I love it. I love the whole idea of being curious rather than judgmental. And something occurred to me about the word judgment that I think I kind of already knew it, but it kind of coalesced into a clear, conscious thought. which is that judgment is kind of like the really nice, polite, high society version of blaming and punishing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put it in those stark terms, all of a sudden it doesn't sound so good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
100%. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are a lot of people who believe that injustice, right? Justice is a big deal for a whole lot of people. I'm not sure if they really fully grasp what it is that they're grasping after.
Mm-hmm. What they're asking for. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you throw in the mix something that Stream of David said, the highest vibration being appreciation. And in that conversation, we were talking about the warped definition of appreciation that we have, that it's something that's quote unquote good. And that's why people struggle with understanding appreciation, but also having appreciation for the opposite of where you're at right now. And if you're at good, then it would be the bad. And with things that are going on politically within, the world today, it's not isolated to one country. I think taking a step back and looking for that appreciation, that understanding of that other side opens you to a whole new world.
It really does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, something else came out of that conversation with the Stream of David. Something I already knew because you'd mentioned it before, but it hadn't really sunk in, that you are also a channel. And we were talking afterward. I was saying, we got to bring this out more during the show. So maybe this is our opportunity today to kind of, delve into that a little bit and find out more about Jodie the channeler. I mean, give us a little bit of the history. How did all that get started for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, when I look back, I had been channeling for a long time. So channeling is basically you're sourcing the other side. So they call mediums the individuals who source the other side, that is the dead. That would be the lower density vibrations. And then the higher density vibrations, people typically call us channelers or channeling. It could be beings, aliens, archangels, ascended master guides. Abraham is a master. I believe it's a he, she. That being is an ascended master guide. That Esther Hicks is trance channeling. So the difference between, there's a couple different kinds of channeling. One being conscious, where I'm sitting right in front of you and I receive the information. Now, when that happens, typically it's filtering through your own consciousness. So it can be distorted based on your belief systems and everything else. It doesn't have to be distorted. You can tell a really clear channel, in my opinion, when they speak differently when they're channeling, and it might not be a vocal thing, like their voice changes. That could perhaps be different. But for me, when I channel and I'm really clear, the words are different. The language is different. It's not the way that I would normally talk. Like an example of this would be my guides use precisely a lot. And that is not a word I use in everyday language. The other side of channeling would be trance channeling. And there's variations of this. Trance channeling would be like what Stream of David is doing, where he allows that being to take over his body. And that's why you can see him moving around and, talking and whatever. It looks like nothing has changed. Maybe the language is different. I didn't know David before that point, so I couldn't actually tell you. But there's also...
I can promise you it definitely is, because I got to know David really well. And
there you go.
After you listen to David, like 3 or 4 times, have a conversation with him 3 or 4 times, and then hear Stream of David, it becomes a stark difference. It's a very big difference.
Yes, you can tell that it's not the same person here versus over here. You can also channel with just allowing the being, trance channel with just allowing the being to take over your voice. And that's what, my best friend Heather does. And hopefully she'll be on the show one day soon.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But she just allows them to use her voice. And then she only trance channels being that she's very, very comfortable with, because you're allowing them to control a lot of things. So you got to be very careful on what you're doing. Or in my opinion, I like to be careful. So I stick mostly with I stick mostly with the conscious channeling. I can trance channel. But when I do it, you
actually can choose then. That's impressive. I mean, for me, being able to do any of it is impressive. I think I'll take this one today. No, I'm going to take that one today. That's great.
Yeah, it's practice. It's like, It's like any other muscle. I believe that everyone has the ability to channel that other side, but where a lot of people fall down is they don't really know how to access it. And then once they do access it, there's a lot of channels that have been corrupted because they're not sourcing the information. Like, who are you talking to is very, very important, because it's a big, massive world on the other side. There is polarity. There's the good and there is the bad, if you will. So who are you sourcing? And they
Now that's
feel
interesting.
vastly
Wait there.
different.
I got to interrupt you for that because that's
Yeah.
really interesting. One of the things that I remember asking the Stream of David in one of the many conversations I had with him was this idea about polarity. And if I remember correctly, the answer they gave basically said polarity it's not a human creation, but it is something that shows up in universes like the human universe. And they suggested there are other universes, different kinds of universes, different structures and so forth that do it differently, but that these universes are constructed in order to experience polarity. But you're talking about polarity actually being a part of the source energy realm as part of that experience, and that's a little different from what they said.
Well, but I agree with both. So I do believe that in this, with Earth, we have the polarity. And I believe that there is beings that are connected that are on, I guess, the esoteric side or the universe side that are also holding that space and that energy, maybe like puppet masters or whatever, if you
puppet
will.
masters, great.
Those dark energies. But I do agree with Stream of David in that what I have channeled is that on other planets or other places, that polarity doesn't exist. That contrast is different. So there is no contrast. There is only that light side of things. So I think in certain dimensions, I guess there would be both sides of it to represent both sides that we have on the planet here. It's same as above as below.
Okay, but to me the interesting part is the idea that if you can call it a world, the world of source is also influenced by polarity. That to me is the new piece of information.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if source is influenced by polarity or if source, and this is just something I don't know, but a hunch, we could channel on it. But that source for this dimension that we know as Earth created polarity here. So
well, that makes sense to me. Yeah,
creation of polarity, because I think we're all one. We have both sides within us, masculine and feminine. We probably have the dark and the light within us as well. It's always that yin and that yang within this dimension that we're living in here. But I think it was created by source.
Which makes sense. I still try to grasp what it's like when you get to what the stream calls your finished state. I can't remember what Abraham calls it, but basically when your physical life terminates and you move back into source energy form.
Yes. Yeah.
And in that source energy form, I often try to imagine what's it like there, and I'm kind of getting from what you're saying that in that source energy form, the source energy still experiences polarity. They just experience it differently, and I'm not sure what the difference is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that they also experience the opposite differently as well. I think it comes from the perspective. Like, I think humans, from a human perspective, there's good and bad emotions. This is an easy one, right? There's, anger or happiness, right? There's the two poles or the two opposite sides. But I think when you get to cross over to that other side, when you're as close to source as you can be, I would assume that would be the closest. That it feels.
I would think you're there at that point. I don't think it's like
yes,
close. It's like you're a part of it at that point.
You're there.
You're totally
exactly.
in the stream.
Yeah, and I think that polarity is experienced differently, as well as the opposite of polarity is experienced differently, because they're not so attached to everything like we are.
And also polarity, as now, of course, I'm kind of working within the realm of this physical world that we're in. So in a sense, my thought process is limited to that. But I kind of imagine that polarity is time-based, that there isn't so much polarity without time.
Ooh, I
I
don't
could be
know.
wrong about that, but that's my sense of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Because
mean,
polarity also requires experiencing the polarity, and that requires a time frame.
yeah, I don't know.
I don't know
That
either.
that is a fabulous question. Um, yeah, I don't know. And when I say polarity when channeling, something that I want to be clear on is it doesn't mean that it's always bad. Like
Hmm.
we look at polarity as like these dark entities that are going to take over your body and kill you or whatever, right? Like the scary movie stuff.
Yeah.
And in my journey of learning how to channel, I was corrupted as a channel,
Wow.
because when you have a very light mission, the other side, the way that it's explained to me, the other side, the lighter that you get or the more that you step into that light, the more everyone can see you in the entire universe. You become, seen essentially, by anything and everything. And if you're not careful about who you are sourcing, if you're wanting to talk to your higher self or your ascended master guide, or you want to talk to a specific archangel like Archangel Michael or Metatron or Abraham, you want to talk to someone specifically. If you're not sourcing that and you're not verifying their frequency before you get the information, depending on where you are and what you have set up for security, somebody else can come in. It's just like if you had a blindfold on right here and you were talking to somebody, someone else could walk in. And if they have a very similar voice, you might not know unless you're really paying attention that someone else just walked into the room and is telling me something else.
I'm going to date myself by saying this, but it sounds like an old-fashioned telephone party line.
Yes, exactly. It is a party line. We used to have one of those too. So yeah, that's right. And for me, so when you step into your gifts, you start stepping into your purpose within this lifetime, whatever it is, you start to become a higher vibrational being. Let's say your lights turn on and everyone can see you. Now, if the other side, the polarity, has a mission that kind of rubs up against yours or isn't going to go well because of you, now they're going to see you and there's a target on your back, or potentially could be. So I felt that I had a target on my back because of the mission that I have. And I was introduced to new guides from a close friend. And I never questioned it. I was just like, oh, these new guides showed up. They showed up as what they called 13 gems. They said they were like of the ascended masters. And I never verified anything. I just took everything someone told me at face value, and then I began channeling all 13 of them. And
Well, that raises an interesting question, though. How do you verify?
yes, that is a great question. Every single being, including us as humans in this human form, has a specific energy signature. So you can verify their energy signature. And the difference in between the two, from my experience, when I was channeling these 13 gems on a physical perspective, it felt heavy. The energy was really dense. It felt like there was a huge weight on my shoulders. And then there was anxiety that came with the information. There was emotional attachment to it. And I felt like, oh my God, I got to get this done. And like it was just this high anxiety and pressure that came through when I was speaking to them. And I didn't even notice that, that was different. But when you're channeling light beings, it's almost like that there's this separation there. They're not really going to tell you exactly what to do. They can give it suggestions, but they have to be very mindful of free will, because you have free will on this planet. And that's what we're here for, is that free will component. And then even when they tell you something bad, like, I don't know, like whatever, you could pick whatever it is that you would infer as a human as bad, the information doesn't come across with that same depth of sorrow, if you will, or pain. It comes across very neutral. And there's always like this other perspective of light that accompanies it. In my examples of channeling, or my perspective when I've been
Yeah.
channeling. Yeah.
Well, it
So
makes
it feels
sense.
very different.
It makes a lot of sense actually, because, well, I mean, you talked about how humans think in terms of, stuff that's good or stuff that's bad. I've actually learned, in part because of my former co-host Cindy Chavez. She kind of talked me into this. We had a long conversation about it on one episode. I've kind of left behind the idea of good and evil,
Yep.
and I've translated that into desired and undesired,
Mm-hmm.
because we have so much baggage attached to good and bad, good and evil, that it actually distorts any conversation, often beyond recognition.
For
Either a
sure.
conversation I'm having with somebody else or a conversation I'm having within my own head.
Mm-hmm.
So just by translating over to desired and undesired, well, now all of a sudden it becomes a whole lot easier to discern what it is I'm talking about to myself or to anybody else. And it also becomes easier to have that perspective you just described, where, yeah, the news would often be considered quote bad news unquote, but it doesn't feel like bad news. It just feels like information.
It's just information.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's your response to it that
Right.
matters after that
Yeah.
point, I think.
Exactly. And when
Yeah.
I tie in the idea, also something I've learned since doing the show, the idea that I get to choose what my response is, it becomes an entirely different experience. So,
Entirely
I
different.
mean, right now we have a friend who, a pair of friends who, one of whom has cancer and is probably close to terminating his life.
Aw.
And the way I'm looking at it is, it's okay.
Yeah.
That's the way it feels.
Yep.
Now that my wife is closer to them than I am. They were originally her friends before I met them. So that certainly is playing a role, I'm sure. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, I have the same kind of feeling I had when my mom passed and when my dad passed,
Mhm.
and that was, oh, it's about time. I mean, it just kind of fits right now. They're kind of at the state of being done,
Mhm.
and that's where this person is. He's pretty much at the state of being done.
Yeah. We just did I have a YouTube show, and we just did an episode all on I chose this life. So channeling what that looks like, do you have a green room? Like how does it actually work? Do you choose all of the things? It was a fantastic episode, but we were talking about that, everyone playing a role in your life and you signing up for it, you saying, yes, I will be that person. And it's easier to find appreciation when you start to look at it from that perspective, because maybe it's you really wanted to experience I don't know, flying off a roller coaster to your death. Like that
Oh
sounded
my
really
God.
cool, right? I don't know, maybe that you're like, yeah, that's the finale for my life, whatever reason. We're here to experience things, because that experience doesn't exist on the other side, not the way that it does in this dimension. But the person who fixed the roller coaster or didn't and subsequently caused the accident also has to sign up for that experience to give that to you as well. And what a beautiful gift to give you exactly what you wanted. But then we get to the human experience and it doesn't, like, now you want to blame the dude that didn't fix the roller coaster and like it's all his fault and he's bad and everything. And we struggle as humans to find appreciation in that. But when you step
We do.
back to the beginning of I chose this, or I signed up for this life, and these people who played these roles in it, they also signed up too, to either give me an experience or me give them an experience. I find it easier to find appreciation in that.
Yep, I understand. That makes sense. I
Yep.
also know what you're talking about often is described as being a soul contract.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember with the first few times I was exposed to that concept, again, you're on the program, and I was asking myself, well, what do I think of that? And earlier on, I was much more resistant to it than I am now. I can't say I'm totally on board with it. I am mostly on board with it. But there are parts of me that aren't quite there yet. I kind of suspect I would get there. I'm going to get to the point where I totally embrace it. But I also know, like, I mean, just a couple days ago, I interviewed a guy here on the program who went through a horrific childhood, absolutely horrific, and managed miracle upon miracles, almost without help, almost without mentorship, to completely turn his life around, turn it into success, and go around helping other people. It's almost a miracle that he got to where he is today. And I didn't want to bring up the concept during the program. I figured that just would be not respectful to what story he was telling. But I asked him afterward, and I told him I didn't want to bring this up on the program, but I'm kind of curious. And he says, yeah, I've had people bring up that concept. I don't believe it for a second.
Oh, okay.
I don't believe, he says, and so I asked him, well, what do you think was the reason why you ended up coming here? He says, because a sperm met an egg. I mean, literally, he was not willing to go there at all. So that's part of the reason why I wonder, okay, yeah, I can kind of see the argument for a contract like that existing. But if somebody actually gets here and gets it to the point where they're unwilling to even consider the idea that they came here through a contract, I have to take that and give that some respect.
Yeah.
And the respect says, well, among other things, I have to question the idea of how they end up getting here. And I don't know the answer. I can't say I figured it out. I'm just saying I feel the pull in both directions.
Yeah. And will you ever truly know until it's your time to cross over?
Probably not. I don't know. On the other hand, there are a lot of things I've learned in the last 10 years that I never thought I'd learn. So I don't even rule that one out.
Yeah. You never know. It's interesting. We were speaking of verifying, like, who do you know? How do you know who you're talking to? And one of the coolest experiences I've had with verifying was with my grandmother. So I don't typically channel people that have crossed over. It's happened a couple of times. Where I keep my density or my frequency when I'm channeling is quite high, so that I don't get all that riffraff. It's just easier, and the channel is clearer. So they have to go up quite a ways in terms of frequency or density to actually get my attention while in the channel. Okay. And so it's happened once or twice when I've channeled for other people, like grandparents have come in or somebody that really wanted to say something. But for me, the only time that I've ever sought it out was when my grandmother died. So my dad had called me, and I remember I was at home, and he said that she had passed away. And, she was this able-bodied woman, fully functioning brain, like smart, all of these things. And then, her heart started failing, and they put her in to a facility where she had monitoring, like a long-term care facility. And she was convinced in her own brain that as soon as she went there, she would die, and everybody would leave her, and she'd be alone, and she would die alone, and all of this stuff. And that's exactly what happened. She went from being okay to dying the very next day.
Wow.
Not like it wasn't that quick when she moved in, but
that's pretty quick,
it was a very quick transition, and no one really saw. Like eventually we saw it coming, but it still felt like a shock. Like, wow, we just saw her yesterday at my Auntie Joyce's birthday, and she was totally fine, and then all of a sudden today she's gone. And I was grappling with that after I got off the phone with my dad, and I wanted to make sure she was okay. And remembering that we all have our own energetic signature, I decided to look for her. So I sat down on my bed and I closed my eyes and I took a deep breath. And then I brought forward what felt like Ludi, my grandmother's name, what her signature of energy felt like. And then I went looking for it within the universe. And then I found her.
When you're saying you went looking for her, you make it sound like it's an actual journey.
It sort of is. Some people would call that like astral traveling, where you're moving your energy outside of your body, outside of the realm that you're sitting within. So I just moved beyond, the house that I was sitting in, and went into the universe, what I have a picture in my mind it looks like. And I went looking until I found that same energetic signature, because it's the same with the soul. It's the soul that carries it in my perspective, or what I believe. And I found her, and I was like, hey, you all right? Like, you good? And she's like, yes, I'm so good. I'm so happy. You don't need to worry about me. And hearing that and feeling the love that she had sent back to me in that moment was everything I needed.
Yeah. And I could certainly resonate with that, because I had a similar experience when my dad passed.
Okay.
My dad passed from symptoms related to Parkinson's disease. So it was, I won't go into the details of it, but in a word, he starved to death. He couldn't swallow the last 3 months of his life. So it was just pretty miserable. And so his passing was actually a relief. But there's also that piece of you. And I was still pretty early in my appreciation of how all this stuff works, my knowledge really of how all this stuff works. And so, there's a piece of me that was wondering, well, first of all, does he really continue? If he has continued, how's he doing? All that kind of stuff. My sister has been over the years developing a little bit of psychic ability, practicing, going to courses and all that kind of thing. And I think it was, let's see, my dad died on a Tuesday, so it must have been like 5-6 days later. She went to church with my mom. And my sister isn't really a big churchgoer, but she went with my mom that weekend. And while they were in the service, in the midst of the service, she started getting a massive headache. And her training had taught her that if you get a massive headache, somebody's trying to contact you. So she said, "Oh, is that you, Dad?" And she instantly got a yes. So she felt like she had a connection going on there. And my sister, I love telling the story. My sister, being my sister, the very first question that came out of her mouth was, "What's it like on the other side?"
Of course. Yeah. We're always so curious.
And the answer that came back was festive. And when my sister told me that story, I knew it was my dad. And the reason I knew it was my dad is my sister was a drama major in school. She went to theater school. She has been involved with theater a lot of her life. All of her ways of expressing things are dramatic. So she would never describe something as festive. She would describe it as awesome, fantastic, incredible. Festive would not be part of her vocabulary. It definitely was part of my dad's vocabulary. And that's how I knew it was him and not her trying to, create a message or something like that.
Yeah.
So once I got that, I thought that was pretty cool. And of course, the message got around to the whole family. So we all found out, that she'd had that experience. It affected all of us positively. So when the time came for the memorial service, there was no funeral, it was just a memorial service. We all gathered at the church where it had all been planned. And I remember this distinctly. It's a Protestant church, so it's handled a little bit differently from the way the Catholics or the Episcopals or something like that handle it. It's a very kind of low key kind of a situation, and they have a sort of an after room or an altar room next to the sanctuary where they allow the family to gather. So it was myself, my sister, my brother, my wife, my niece. I think, let's see, the owner wasn't in the picture yet. Somebody else was there. I can't remember who it was, but anyway, it was immediate family, and the minister, and who I didn't know. The only one who knew minister was my mom. None of us knew him, and we're just having this light conversation. Sometimes talking about dad, sometimes talking about other things and so forth. And I'm looking at the minister's face, and he has this really quizzical look on his face, and it finally dawned on me why we were there. We were there so that he could console us before we went in for the service. And there was no consoling to be done. And that's why he was looking so quizzical. He didn't know what to do. It was a different kind of experience for him. And he kind of nailed the point home when he did the sermon during the service. So you can't call it a sermon. It's more like it's not really a eulogy. It was sort of a light eulogy. I don't know what else to call it. But anyway, he was talking about my dad and talking about his life and so forth. And he said, one of the things that I want to tell you about is I just had the experience of sitting with the family. I was amazed and astonished at how much faith this family has. Now, you have to understand, this is a very funny remark, because the only person in that entire group who went to church even was my mom.
Yeah.
All of us had kind of left various forms of religion behind in the past. So the idea of a religious faith going on in the family was ludicrous.
Yeah.
But what he was observing, the only way he could think of to describe it was as faith. And that faith is really that certainty of knowledge you get when you know you've achieved that connection, when you know you've gotten information. You can't prove it. You couldn't possibly go into a court of law and prove that you got the connection. You couldn't even set up a scientific experiment to prove it. But deep down, yeah, I made the connection. And that's what we were all living on at that point.
No kidding. Well, and I think that's the difficult thing about, faith in general is, and going back to that question that you had asked, the gentleman that you were interviewing, he was like, nah, it's not a soul contract. It was just a sperm and an egg that came together. It's not, this other side of things is like the wind. You can't see it. But in terms of proof, when you start, for me anyway, when I started to lean into it, there would be I would feel that beyond a doubt feeling because of the way that things lined up. Like a recent experience. I mean, when I started learning about faith, what I started to look at was the systems that we have within our own body. They're so intricate and so magnificent. Like having everything work so beautifully together, even on the planet outside of our own bodies. Like that is just mind blowing that this has been created, and that lends towards my faith. But even small things, like I was driving somewhere. It was in the city where I have my office, and I got this, what I would call a download, basically my higher self telling me, some sort of instruction. Because we have this connection all the time. Some people call it gut feelings, and I think that a gut feeling is a little bit different. But we have this connection to this higher level of information all the time. It's just whether you're turned on or turned off. And I don't mean that in a sexual whether you've turned it on or you've turned it off. And our society has found ways to turn that down and turn it off completely, to separate us from that. And I'm not talking about religion, just faith. But I was in the city and I was like, I got this message. You need to go to your office. There's someone that needs to talk to you. Okay. And this is how I live my life. Okay, great. I'll go. See, let's go explore. I'm curious. And I walked through the door and I was turning on the lights. We have this long hallway, and then we're, at the kind of the end of the hallway, and I'm unlocking the door to go into our office suite, and I'm turning on the lights, and this gentleman passes by and says, "Hey, I've been looking for you. I wanted to talk to you."
Okay.
And I'm like, I know. That's actually why I came here today.
You actually said that to him.
Yeah. He's like, what? It's all good. I just had a feeling somebody had to talk to me, so I came here. And I mean, I could have picked up the mail too. Like, it wasn't a wasted trip. It was, it was right around the corner, and no harm, no foul in this curious journey that I was going on. But it was just, it's in those moments that I continue to build a case for there's so much more going on to life than what we see in this third dimension.
I think the word that I have found describes it best for me is the word resonance. Because I remember the first time, for instance, that I heard some of the recorded workshops of Abraham.
Yeah. And
hearing the way they expressed themselves through her, and what the thoughts they were passing along, the concepts they were encouraging us to listen to and absorb and think about, they all resonated. I mean, there was just this feeling inside that kept coming back. Yes, 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 yes. It was a continuous series of yeses, like nothing I'd ever experienced in my life before.
Like pure truth.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was almost a little bit scary, a little bit freaky, because I had not experienced anything like that before. And instantly my defenses go up and say, okay, well, what's going on here?
Yeah.
who's yanking my chain here?
What's happening?
Right. But I didn't hang with that one very long. But the thought occurred to me, like, am I being manipulated in some way here? Is someone pushing the right buttons because they know the right buttons to push? Because boy, they were the right buttons. Let me tell you, they were dead on.
Yeah.
So yeah, and to a certain extent, I still think about that at times. But no, the resonance is so strong that I pretty easily just say, yeah, I can't prove any of it, but it's true. I know it's true. And if I can't prove it, well, that's their loss.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this connection is often turned off because of the definitions and attachments we have to, again, good and bad, true or false. If I believe in something that is false, if we follow this thread within our own mind, if I believe something that is false and then it turns out it is false, then I'm embarrassed. And then now that means that I'm an idiot. And if I'm an idiot, then you go down this trail of like, then I've done something bad. And the definition,
pre-paving our way to it not working. That's really what you're saying here.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So it's looking at these words that we're using and what's actually holding us back from, jumping off the cliff in terms of faith. In believing in whatever you want to believe in, but believing in it, believing in yourself, even wholeheartedly. It's these definitions and what we think will happen if we, follow through with something and we don't know 100% or we fall down or whatever. It's all of these things that we've created in our own mind that stop us from having this deeper connection with ourselves and this deeper connection with the universe.
Which, by the way, is actually the part that made it easier for me to accept. Knowing that we can, because it really reinforced for me just how friggin' creative we are.
Yeah.
I mean, we're creating blocks for ourselves. We're creating resistance points, but oh my God, we're creative. The ways, the variations we can come up with to stop ourselves from going down these roads are infinite, and we demonstrate all of them.
Right? Yeah. And it's that what you just said was so beautiful, Walt, because you can see that you've detached from any sort of meaning around it. Like, oh man, I created another meaning around this, and I'm bad and blah, blah, blah. You're like, wow, fascinating that my brain can do that. What else can it do?
Right,
that's a
exactly.
beautiful perspective, and that's appreciating, all that it is. That's beautiful.
It goes beyond appreciation in one sense. It more feels like being blown away. Like, holy crap, where did that come from?
Right? Yeah. What else can I create?
Yeah. I mean, oh wow. And of course, when you start kind of paying attention, looking for that, noticing it more often, you see it, of course, all the time, and it starts showing up in a variety of different ways, and a lot of different circumstances, different people, and so forth. And I think that's where the reinforcement comes in, because really that's what we want. Abraham points out, a belief is a thought you think over and over again. Well, it's the reinforcement of it. You keep going back to it over and over again. It starts to become familiar. It starts to have a sense of continuity to it. And even if it's a false thought, it can still have a sense of continuity to it. And by false, I mean one that doesn't actually serve us.
Exactly.
I kind of take the whole idea of ill will out of the equation, because I used to go there, and I came to realize that I was the ill will. I was the one generating, the boogeyman. Because there was actually a time in my life, I've told you this story about how, our businesses got wiped out, and we were in desperate straits, and we're deep in debt and all this other stuff. And there reached a point in time when I actually said to Louise, I think I'm cursed. I think somebody is blocking me. I really did believe that. I didn't realize it was me.
Yeah. I am cursing myself. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. In that moment. Well, and once that groove gets so deep, you've done something a certain way for a certain amount of time, whatever it is, it's different for everyone. But the more that you do it, it becomes so comfortable. Then we start building up these other belief systems on top of it. Like, if it's not like this, then I am unsafe. There's something that we're going to lose that we value, that puts us into this like panic mode again. So it keeps us on that track over and over and over again. So there's like this whole ball of wax that you need to uncover as to why you're doing said thing. And if it's actually serving you, if it's not, then building a new case for yourself, or that's what I call it with my students. Like a lawyer, you build a new case of what you want to see, because it's only that you're seeing these things because you're so focused on seeing those things. So your brain delivers, the universe delivers, because this is what you're asking for. So you have to learn to build a new case for yourself to have this new experience.
That's where I really learned how powerful this power that we have to focus really is. The joke phrase I like to use to describe it is, be careful where you point that thing.
Yeah.
Because it really is like that. It's almost like this weapon. If you aren't careful, you can blow something away. Or more metaphorically speaking, in more actual terms, it's more like, well, you could start really bringing something into your life you don't want to have anything to do with, because you just keep going back to it over and over again. And boy, is that effective. It's scary how effective that is.
Yeah.
So I think if I were to adopt the idea, and I kind of lean this way, but not totally. If I were to adopt the idea that we came into this life in order to learn something, lots of people advocate that. Lots of people say, yeah, we came here to learn certain things. And I kind of scratch my head and say, well, maybe. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about that. But if we did, the one thing I know that would fit that for me is learning to come into this life to recognize consciously how to control my focus. That actually does make some sense to me.
Yeah.
because
Conscious awareness.
we have continuous opportunity on this one. It's it never ever stops.
No.
And until we are willing to actually start doing it, start deliberately focusing, we're in that default mode. And that default mode is like being attached to a cork floating in the water. You have no control at that point, or seemingly have no control. And you're just bobbing all over the place, depending on how bad the winds are that day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I can see the value, first of all, of learning to focus. And second of all, I can see why this entire life is focused on focus. It's all about, hey, focus, come on, focus. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3, focus.
Yeah. I think it's the whole reason why we have contrast. Like, this is another example of what you don't want. Okay, here, but like, to bring you back to, what are you focusing on? What are you calling into your life? All of these things. And I think it's so funny because at a point in time in my life, I would get so mad, like, am I not done with this stupid lesson yet? And then it shifted. I shifted my belief system enough and my consciousness enough to recognize we live on a planet with contrast. Like, this is what this density is all about, the experience. So it's not like I'm ever going to be done or ever going to be perfect.
Right.
That doesn't actually exist. Yet I can have perfection. Like, it can feel so perfect regardless of what's happening in my life. I can have that perfection right here in this moment, but I will never be said societal wise perfect. My life will never be absolutely perfect, because this is where we live, and we're just in this constant evolution of understanding ourselves and understanding the universe. And when I decided that I don't want to be angry about that anymore, because there's no done point. Throw that out the window. There's no done point. We're constant evolution forever until we leave this planet, and then we come back for round 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, because I do believe we reincarnate. But instead, be curious of, oh, cool. How am I growing now? What am I discovering about myself? It's like this epic journey that I go on with me pretty much every single day. Like, hey, Jodes, where are we going? And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Yeah, it's true. It's funny when you said that about the reincarnation. I remember Louise and I got a gift from, I think it was from my sister, a psychic reading one day. And so we got the psychic reading, and the psychic told us how many times we'd been in the same life together. And the number was in the thousands. And and how many total lives we'd experienced here in this realm. And if for Louise, it was like in the 2,000 to 3,000 range. For me, it was in the 1,000 to 2,000 range. And I remember my 2 reactions to it. My first reaction was, wow, I think it was 1,600, 1,700 times, something like that. And then my second reaction was, what, only 1,600, 1,700? What happened after or before that? It was both at the same time. Both reactions, like, wow, that's a lot. And okay, well, I'm an eternal being. What happened to the rest of it?
Yeah, what happened to the rest? Yeah. That's so funny.
So it's funny how perspective works its way in once you start becoming perspective. Is that a verb? I think I just made one.
I think so.
When you're perspective, when you are constantly engaging consciously in changing and looking at different perspective or perspectives, you find yourself doing things at the same time. On the one hand, that's a really big number. On the other hand, what happened to the rest of it? You start seeing things from multiple perspectives continuously. I find that goes on a lot. I was noticing it. I was out on a walk today, and during the walk, there was this one little conversation that I didn't like the result of a whole lot. It wasn't bad. It wouldn't fall into the bad category, but I just didn't like it very much. It kept coming back, and I kept replaying it in my mind. And I was starting to get annoyed. I was actually calling out to my mind, stop it. Enough of this already. And then a few minutes later, play again. And I went through this a number of times until I finally remembered, oh yeah, we're pretty rough on ourselves. What do I have to do instead? So once again, new perspective coming into it. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. When you get on this track of constantly looking for new perspectives, they start to come. They come at the most surprising times. And you don't necessarily even have to be in conscious mode to say, I am going to consciously change perspective. You just start changing perspectives. Yeah. Which is really interesting. I
Yeah,
guess
it's
perspective is also
wild.
a habit. It is wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does become kind of a habit. You start looking at things, life differently.
Yeah.
That's, that's one of the things that my friends say often about me is that, I have this wildly different perspective on things. Like I can switch anything to the positive. I just know how to take a far enough step back to see something different. And I've had practice choosing something that feels better instead. I can continue on this track that feels like crap for me, like you were kind of doing with that conversation, right? Like, I don't want to do this. And I mean, it's not perfect. Can't do this like every single time. When something's really close to my heart, then, it's a deeper conversation than if it's like, I shouldn't have ate that ice cream or whatever. Right? There's levels to this, but it's that constant choosing of, no, I choose what feels good for me unapologetically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I remember the first episode that you were on with me. You were on the show, and I instantly responded to that piece of you, because that piece of you came through really clear. This idea that you could always find that really approving and appreciative way of looking at anything.
Mhm.
And I valued that so highly. That's why I think within 24 hours I sent you an email saying, "You want to be a co-host on the show?" Because
And here
I
we
love
are
that.
now.
Yeah, here we are now.
Yeah,
But
beautiful.
that's how much I've come to value that kind of thing. I love it with all the different perspectives I get from the guests who are on the show.
Mhm.
And every once in a while I do like to ask somebody to be a co-host. But I love the fact also that by looking at these perspectives, I keep looking for more perspectives. It's
Yes.
become habitual. It has become just part of my routine. So I may not be perfect at it. I don't really care if I'm perfect at it. I'm so much better at it. To me, that's the whole question. It isn't, am I perfect? Am I better? And the
Yeah.
answer is a resounding yes.
Mhm.
And it's getting better all the time, to quote
Yep.
the Beatles. I mean, it really does get better and better and better and better. So yeah, I'm liking
And
that
with
part a
it,
lot.
life. When you have a new perspective on your reality that is in front of you, life gets better.
Yeah, it
Just
really does.
I've found it's way more juicier this way than it was before. Like I'm having way more fun.
Oh, me too. Me too. And 'cause I've been down the other road. I went down that road
Yep.
for 50 years. I was like, oh, God,
Yep.
yeah. I have, if we come onto this world and come into this life needing, and I'm not quite sure why, but needing to experience all this negativity to appreciate the other side, I got my dose.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
got my dose big time.
yeah. But there is a question that my friend and I have been kicking around that
Okay.
there's this conversation of new earth and that we are ascending as a population. We are ascending to this new density, and the earth, some people you talk to, the earth will completely destruct. Some people will stay there and they will just be in that contrast forevermore, well, until they, leave the earth, and then if they choose to reincarnate there. But basically this new planet, new earth, that is a new density and a new vibration, and there, that polarity, that contrast no longer exists. Now the question that I've mulled over in my head is it boring?
I think it is.
Maybe.
I
Yeah,
think
like
it's
if all you
incredibly cool.
know is bliss,
Yeah.
you don't know that there is the opposite of that. So then maybe you have less appreciation, but maybe you're more of an evolved being. I don't know. That's an answer I don't have.
I actually don't go. I know what you're talking about. I mean, I've had that conversation with others. I've heard others express similar kinds of views. I don't think that it's a new Earth. I think it's the same Earth. I think it's just us changing.
Could be.
I I I think actually this Earth is pretty darn cool right now, and it gets cooler. And I don't mean temperature wise. I mean
Yeah.
in terms of this is a great place. I
Yeah.
think it becomes, if it was a desirable amusement park before, it's an even more desirable amusement park afterward.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of a feeling to it. So yeah, I don't really see it being replaced. I see it being enhanced. I see the
That
whole
sounds
experience
good
being
too.
enhanced. And plus, there's also another point that I made this in conversation with the Stream of David. This is a more recent one, dating back 2 or 3 months or so. Because during this particular episode of the show, the stream was really hammering on the idea of the importance and the value of the polarity and how useful it is to us. And there were others in the conversation. I think Dan Mangano may have been a part of that one. Not 100% sure who was involved, but the point that was coming out was, well, we need this polarity. It's so important, and we need to embrace it, and we need to feel good about it and all that kind of stuff. And okay, I'm okay with that to an extent, but it was getting to the point where it was all polarity, and by polarity they meant bad stuff, all this stuff, all this drama and so forth. And the thought that just kept going through my head is there like a drama shortage going on that I don't know about? Is there like a polarity shortage that I'm missing the news headline on? Because I don't think there is.
No.
So why are we getting freaked out about the end of polarity? Because I don't even see it on the horizon.
Yeah, we've got a lot. I don't know. There's another question that I have that I don't have fully fleshed out enough to talk about intelligently, but okay. I can say this, that I think it goes along the premise of we are all connected, and the premise of we are all one. So the theory of God or the universe, whatever, if you will, has decided that it wants to have all of these different experiences, and thus that is us. We are all a divine spark of God, the universe. So we are all one. Mm-hmm. And which means that you and I are the same on some level. We're just having this different experience. We look different. So then when I had that ectopic pregnancy and lost the baby and all of that stuff, this question came back up when it came to emotions. Like, is there really like a good and a bad, like a happy or sad, or is it the same? Is it one? And you're experiencing this side versus this side, but you can transmute to the whole?
Sure. I think that the answer to the question is yes, if that is a question.
Yeah, it is.
I think the answer is very clearly yes. Of course, it's all part of the same whole.
Yeah. So then it doesn't actually exist independently of one another. It is same. Yeah. And maybe that's why when you have a tragedy, they always say that there's like collateral beauty or a silver lining or something like that. There would have to be, if that was true, if they were one.
Well, it's also why the pessimist would behave the way the pessimist does. The pessimist will take any beautiful situation and find the dark cloud.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the exact same phenomenon. It's just which side are you looking at? Yeah. We get the choice. We get to decide which side we're going to look at.
Yeah, that's right.
The grand illusion is believing we only get to look at one side.
Yeah. We're not trees.
No, we're not. Although I don't want to take away from trees. Trees are actually pretty smart too. But
yes, they are. Yes, plants incredibly smart too. Yeah. Totally different topic. But the more I learn about how they protect themselves, the wilder I think they are.
And animals too. Mm-hmm. Animals, insects. I mean, I have, in the last 10 years since I've been doing this show, I have a completely new appreciation for life in all its forms. Mm-hmm. And I'm still exploring the forms that science doesn't consider to be alive, but I consider to be alive. And still trying to put those forms into words and to concepts so I can understand them. Like I still not quite sure how a rock is conscious. I just know that it is.
Yeah.
But I can't describe it any more than that because I really have no frame of reference to work with.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know either. I just feel the frequency. Like, look at all those rocks back behind my head.
Yeah, right.
They're crystals, but I call them rocks.
and rocks definitely have measurable frequencies, so we know that that's true. Mm-hmm. So consciousness, in my mind, has to be a part of it. I equate consciousness and vibration. The two go together. You can't have one without the other.
I agree.
Yeah. Mm. Well, we got woo this particular episode. We went over the woo dam.
Yeah, we sure did. All the woo.
All the woo that's fit to record.
That's right.
That's what you're going to hear on LOA today. Nothing but the woo. No. No, but this has been really good. I want to continue in future conversations talking more about your channeling experiences and so forth. And maybe we can get you to do a stream of David type show sometime.
Sure. Yeah.
Would you like
I'd
that?
love to. My guides are who guide me with abundance consciousness. They call themselves the Abundance Consciousness Council. So they've got
Okay.
lots of really great material and just a lot of really great insight. So
So
yeah,
we'll have to
sure.
bring we'll bring the ACC in.
Yes.
Right? It has to be an acronym, right?
Yeah. I just call them AC. But yeah,
Okay.
we could call them ACC. But yeah,
Well, either way,
AC.
that's fine. Well, it's your group. You get to name them whatever you want. It's really
Yeah. Okay.
your choice.
We'll just call them AC. It's easy.
Okay. All right. So that's fair.
AC. Yep.
Okay.
We'll bring them in and see what they have to say. That'd be lovely.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
that. So thank you much.
Amazing.
Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.